So, when you think of Italy, you probably picture one country, right? Unified. But for like 1,000 years, that just wasn't true at all. And the real question isn't just how it eventually became one country, but why it spent most of its history as this brilliant, chaotic mess of rival states. It's a question we've all probably wondered about, right? You look at a map, you remember the Roman Empire, this incredible unifying force, and then you look at Italy, its very heartland, and you see it spent more than 1,000 years as just a bunch of warring city-states. It kind of feels like a failure, doesn't it? But what if we're asking the wrong question entirely? Well, that simple idea is the key to everything. See, the story of Italy isn't about failing to unite. Not at all. It's the story of a system that was so successful, so powerful on its own terms, that unification wasn't just hard, it was actually the last thing the people in charge wanted. Okay, so to really get this, we've got to unlearn something we take for granted. For over 1,000 years, power in Italy didn't flow up to a king. It didn't work like that. It flowed outward from the cities. And that one simple fact, well, it changes everything. It created this dynamic that was just almost impossible to break. All right, let's dig into how this unique system even came to be. It really boils down to three big things, three G's that shaped the peninsula for centuries: geography, gods, and gold. Let's tackle them one by one. First up, geography. Now, you might look at the boot and think, hey, that looks pretty contained, easy to unite. But you'd be wrong. It's actually a natural divider. You've got the Apennine Mountains running right down the middle like a giant spine, cutting regions off from each other. And with all that coastline, a city could just trade with the whole world by sea and completely ignore the guy just over the mountain. Think about France, right? It's all flat plains and rivers connecting everything, perfect for a king to take control. But in Italy, the land itself rewarded cities for going it alone. And this next point is huge. When the Roman Empire finally collapsed, there wasn't some new king or emperor waiting in the wings to take over. Instead, you had this power vacuum, and local big shots, bishops, merchants, you name it, they just stepped up. Cities started acting like their own little countries, defending their own walls, making their own money, writing their own laws. So get this, Italy didn't break apart from being united. It just never got put back together in the first place. And that brings us to gold, the money. See, everywhere else in Europe, power meant one thing: land. You had lords and feudal loyalty, but in Italy, power was liquid. It was cash. It came from controlling ports, trade routes, and, crucially, banking. This whole economic setup was perfect for republics run by clever merchants, not kingdoms run by some guy who just owned a lot of dirt. I mean, if you control the money, who really needs a king? So this whole system created these absolute powerhouses, the city-states. And to really understand what was going on, you can't just look at them as dots on a map. You gotta meet them like characters in a play. Each one had its own unique personality, its own playbook for power. Okay, so you've got your main players, the heavy hitters. You've got Florence, the money men, basically the corporate boardroom. Then there's Venice, the stable, seafaring empire. Think of them as the board of directors. And then you have Milan, the military machine inland. That's the general's HQ. And yeah, each one played the game in a completely different way. Let's take Florence. I mean, it's the perfect example of this new kind of power. The Medici family, they didn't command huge armies. They ruled with an accounting book. They could literally destroy a rival city just by calling in their loans and cutting off their credit. It was this quiet, ruthless game where the real weapons weren't swords, but numbers. Venice, on the other hand, was a totally different animal. They were an oligarchy and they were obsessed, absolutely obsessed, with stability. Why? Because if you're a trading empire, chaos is bad for business. Just think about the Doge's palace. It wasn't some fancy home. It was a machine for running the state, riddled with secret passages for spies, all to make sure no one person got too much power. Venice put its faith in the system, not in any one man. And then, smack dab in the middle of all this, you've got the ultimate wild card, the Papal States. The Pope wasn't just a religious figure. Oh no. He was a king, ruling a huge chunk of land right through the center of Italy. This basically created a permanent political wall. It made it physically impossible for a power in the north to link up with one in the south. Anyone who wanted to unite Italy had to deal with the Pope, and believe me, the church had zero interest in becoming just another part of someone else's kingdom. Okay, so you've got all these rich, powerful, and proud cities. So why didn't one of them just, conquer all the rest? Well, the answer is in the weird, and I mean really weird way they fought their wars. See, these Italian cities didn't have their own citizen armies. Instead, they hired pros, mercenaries, called condottieri. But here's the thing. These guys were a symptom of the problem, and they actually made it worse. Why? Well, because their whole business model was completely upside down compared to a normal army. These condottieri, they played by a few strange, unwritten rules. Rule number 1, you fight for cash, not for a cause. That means your loyalty is always for sale to the highest bidder. Rule number 2, you avoid big, bloody, decisive battles. Why? Which brings us to rule number 3, you protect your assets, your soldiers, at all costs. The logic was cold and simple. A dead mercenary doesn't get a paycheck.
So what was the result of all this? You had a system where there was always a war going on, but nothing ever got settled. Armies would dance around each other, captains would switch sides for a better offer, and most battles just ended in a draw. It basically locked the whole peninsula in this stalemate. No one could ever land the final knockout punch, which meant the division just went on and on. Now, this centuries-long history of being fiercely independent, it didn't just vanish when Italy officially became a country in the 1800s. No way. It's still baked into the DNA of modern Italy today.
I mean, you can see it everywhere. That intense pride people have for their hometown, the crazy rivalries between cities that are just a few miles apart, that is a direct echo of the city-state days. It explains why there's often this deep suspicion of a central government down in Rome, and why you can drive for 30 minutes and find a completely different dialect, different food, different everything. Italy is kind of like a country that's held together by memory.
And this all brings us back to the most important point. Remember how we started? We asked why Italy failed to unite. But we found out that's totally the wrong way to look at it. Italy wasn't a failed nation. For 1,000 years, it was an unbelievably successful collection of city-states. These little powerhouses were rich, they were innovative, and they outlasted massive empires. So maybe the best way to picture pre-modern Italy isn't as a pyramid with a king on top. A better image is a constellation, a network of brilliant, independent stars, each one shining on its own. They were never meant to collapse into a single sun. And honestly, that's a much more fascinating story than just another simple tale of unification.